March of 1913, the United States government approved the Act of Four, which was supposed to supply the U.S. Navy with funding to construct 4 brand new battleships of one class. Throughout a series of designs that were submitted, the United States Navy would choose what would become the Pennsylvania class, which was essentially a slightly improved Nevada class design. On March 16, 1914, the second keel of the class would be laid at Brooklyn Navy Yard within New York City, New York. The vessel's hull would be completed by June 19, 1915, which is the day she was launched and christened USS Arizona BB-39. The Arizona would have quite impressive stats for its time period, with the main belt being 13.5 inches at its thickest, the armored deck being 3 inches at its thickest, and the turret faceplates being upwards of 18 inches at their thickest. The main battery would consist of 12 14-inch 45 caliber guns. The secondary battery would consist of 22 5-inch guns. The tertiary battery would be 4 3-inch guns, which would also operate as the anti-aircraft guns, and the ship would also have 2 21-inch torpedo tubes installed at the stern. The ship's top speed would be 21 knots using 4 Parsons steam turbines and 12 Babcock and Wilcox boilers. What makes Arizona and Pennsylvania different from their predecessors is that these boilers are oil-fed instead of being coal-fed, which was a first for the United States Navy. On the 17th of October, 1916, Arizona was completed and commissioned into the United States Navy. Upon completion, her length was 608 feet, her width was 97 feet, and she had a loaded draft of 29 feet 3 inches. Upon the United States entering World War I in 1917, the Arizona was held back in the United States even though it was the most powerful battleship in the fleet, because the vessel was oil-fed. Most vessels at this time period remained coal-fed, meaning that oil was hardly ever excavated and it was quite expensive to get a hold of. Throughout the roughly 1-year time period that the United States was in World War I, the Arizona would remain in the Chesapeake Bay acting as a gunnery training ship. Roughly a month after World War I had come to a conclusion, the Arizona was tasked with guarding President Woodrow Wilson as he crossed the Atlantic Ocean on the USS George Washington. In the opening months of 1919, the Arizona was sent back to the United States and then sent from the United States to the Mediterranean to participate in a cruise. The rest of 1919 would remain uneventful. In 1921, the Arizona would get the taste of a new ocean when she was finally transferred to the Pacific Fleet. Her first task on July 9th would be to take part in celebrations for the Peruvian Independence Day. In 1923, the Arizona would participate in 2 simulated attacks against the Panama Canal, and between the years of 1925 and 1928, she would participate in multiple voyages, exercises, and fleet maneuvers, which included a simulated defense of the Hawaiian Islands. In 1929, the Arizona, being roughly 13 years old by this point, needed major refits and modernization to bring her up to date, and she would be sent through this process for 3 years. The ship that would emerge from the 3-year modernization would be a brand new Arizona. The vessel would have torpedo bulges added to both sides, which increased her overall width to 106 feet, new Westinghouse geared turbines, which were taken off the incomplete USS Washington, were installed on the Arizona, and brand new oil-fed boilers were added, which would half the number of boilers Arizona needed to reach 21 knots. 2 auxiliary generators were installed, fuel capacity was nearly doubled, more armor was added to the decks and turrets, most notably the deck goes from 3 inches at its thickest to 5 inches at its thickest, and new longitudinal bulkheads were also included. With the United States having roughly 15 years to think about how they want a battleship like Arizona to participate in naval engagements, her armament was heavily modified. Both of her stern torpedo tubes were removed. The main battery elevation was doubled, which nearly doubled the firing range. This upgraded them to the Mark 10 standard turrets, which had roughly 20 miles of range. The ammunition supply was upgraded. New Mark 20 and Mark 7 fire control directors were added, which would operate with the main and secondary batteries. The secondary battery was changed extensively as well, having 10 5-inch 51 cal guns removed. The 12 remaining guns were placed in a lower casemate, whilst 8 25 cal 5-inch dual-purpose AA guns would replace what was removed, whilst it also replaced the 4 3-inch guns. The aircraft catapult located on the stern would be replaced with a larger and newer model to launch larger and more powerful aircraft of the 1930s, and the most notable change to the eye has to do with the superstructure. The 2 cage masts were replaced with 2 tripod masts, which held a 3-level fire control system on the top, and the ship would also obtain an actual superstructure this time. Within the year of 1931, the extensive modernization had finally come to a conclusion, but before Arizona could go on her sea trials, acting President Herbert Hoover took the ship on a cruise in the West Indies. Upon returning to the United States, she would have another aircraft catapult fitted to the top of Turret 3, and at this time period, the Arizona was once again assigned to the Pacific Fleet, which is where she would remain for the rest of her career. Even though in the upcoming years there would be no wartime situation that involved the United States, the Arizona's life would be quite eventful. In 1933, she participated in relief efforts after the Long Beach earthquake. In 1934, the Arizona was the set of a movie called Here Comes the Navy. In 1934 as well, Arizona collided with a fishing trawler, which led to its sinking on the 26th of June. As a result of the collision, 2 people on the fishing trawler were killed, and the Arizona's commander was found guilty for the collision, which led to his replacement. On the 24th of July, 1935, Arizona was participating in gunnery drills when combustion gases from the No. 2 gun turret entered the turret and ended up burning one person, whilst it started an electrical fire that was quickly controlled. Following this fire, the Arizona was docked, where she would be properly repaired, and then the vessel was moored in harbor, where she would remain for the next few years in order to save fuel. In 1938, the Arizona would become flagship of Battleship Division 1, and in 1939, her turrets were upgraded to the Mark 12 standard, which slightly increased her range once again. In October of 1940, the Arizona would receive a minor refit at Puget Sound. The foundation for her surface search radar was added, but the radar itself was not added. She would receive upgraded anti-aircraft directors. 4 Browning 50 caliber water-cooled machine guns were installed on the mainmast top, and the bases for 4 Chicago pianos were installed, but the guns themselves were not. 1 year later, in October of 1941, the Arizona would collide with the USS Oklahoma, which caused moderate damage to the torpedo blister that was quickly repaired. Once when the torpedo blister was repaired, the Arizona would be sent out on her final training mission, which was night firing action with Oklahoma and Nevada. On the night of December 4th, Arizona pulled into Pearl Harbor, where she would moor alongside the Nevada and Oklahoma. In the opening hours of December 7, 1941, the Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor was attacked by the Imperial Japanese Navy. The Arizona was unable to move due to being trapped from ships and land on all directions. The slight advantage to being trapped in all 4 sides, however, was the fact that torpedoes would not be capable of striking the Arizona. This meant that the Japanese had to rely on bombing the ship. Unfortunately for the Arizona, she would be attacked by a series of horizontal bombers, which were carrying the brand new repurposed 16.1-inch shells. In total, Arizona would be struck by 2 of these specialized bombs. The first one would strike Arizona on one of her aft turrets, which caused it to ricochet off the turret armor, where it landed and then exploded on the deck. The second bomb would strike Arizona beside turret 2 on the starboard side. This bomb would either explode above the armored deck, and the explosion would travel through a flash door, setting off the powder magazine, or the most likely scenario is the bomb penetrated the 5-inch armored deck and exploded in the main battery magazine. This caused the Arizona to erupt in a massive ball of flames. Following the explosion, Arizona would take roughly 6 minutes to sink, and 1,177 of her crew ended up being killed, which was nearly half of the kill count at Pearl Harbor. Following the attack, the Arizona was declared a total loss, and no attempt was given to raise or repurpose the ship. However, Arizona's story does not come to an end. A series of examinations were carried out on the ship's superstructure, which found that the forward end of the superstructure was largely crumpled and destroyed, whilst everything aft was largely intact. This meant it was safe for divers to go inside the ship and retrieve safes and sensitive documents in early 1942. Throughout early to mid-1942, much of the ship's superstructure, guns, and ammunition was removed. By October of 1943, salvage work had come to a conclusion on the Arizona. The superstructure was scrapped all the way down to the casemate and galley level. In early 1961, the final alteration saw the removal of the casemate and galley level to make room for what we now have as the present-day memorial. However, the United States government would not fund the memorial's construction. Instead, money was raised through the television show This Is Your Life. Elvis Presley would hold a concert, and the Revell Model Company would make a model kit of the Arizona, which included a brochure which told people how to donate money. Through all of these efforts, nearly $150,000 had been raised to construct the new memorial, which would be completed on Memorial Day in 1962. Nearly 300 people would attend the opening ceremony. Today, the Arizona serves as multiple attractions. You can still visit the memorial to pay your respects to those who had lost their lives in war. The vessel's wreck is still being surveyed to keep an eye on its condition, whilst the ship's superstructure is still largely around, having just been thrown off in some woods on the Hawaiian Islands.